So first and foremost, thank you everyone for joining. Really appreciate it. And all the attendees. I think this is going to be an amazing webinar that we have facilitated for you. I'm going to mention just very briefly what ExecWeb does and who I am, of course. And then I'm going to let Steve, who is a personal friend and a great ambassador, to moderate this incredible webinar. So my name is Val. I'm the founder and CEO of ExecWeb. I founded the company about 3.5 years ago with the mission to fix the broken and inefficient collaboration between cybersecurity vendors and security practitioners. We're a very exclusive cybersecurity network. And what we do is we facilitate introductory sales meetings between cybersecurity vendors and relevant to them security practitioners, and vice versa. And the reason why we're very good at what we do is because we make sure that those meetings are very authentic and genuine, and there is mutual business interest and intent on both sides of our network. So we have also recently launched a marketplace for any cybersecurity vendor who wants to participate in our marketplace. Please let us know. We already have about 900 companies there. And that marketplace was launched just 2 weeks ago, again, with the mission to help you get the right exposure to our ambassadors and any other security practitioners out there who might be interested in your services. And this is, by the way, free of charge to participate in our marketplace. So today's webinar is very, very interesting. It's a very relevant topic, of course, for everyone, which is how does the CISO and security directors in general, security practitioners, go vendor shopping in this day and age? And we're going to cover several topics. The first one will be the factors that are influencing security practitioners' purchasing decisions. Also, we're going to discuss how security practitioners and our ambassadors, the ones here who were so generous with their time to give us 45 minutes of their very valuable time to discuss how they research and evaluate vendors, what sources and channels they use to find the relevant vendors for them to address their pain points that they currently are having, and how you should build trust with them. You're going to hear it from them themselves, how they want to build trust with you and vice versa. And we're going to wrap it up with just a general discussion on the roles of budget, ROI, and POC when it comes to the final decisions that security practitioners make as they're evaluating different vendors. And our 5 esteemed panelists here have obviously decades of experience and represent some of the biggest Fortune 1000 companies. So there is nobody better who can give you that extremely valuable perspective that you can never Google. So with that, Steve, why don't you please take it from here, introduce yourself, and then obviously give the chance for our other panelists to introduce themselves and manage the webinar. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you very much, Val. Hello, audience. Pleasure to be here. So I'm Steve Zalewski. A little bit about me. I've spent about 25 years in cybersecurity. I've worked in the healthcare, in utilities, and in retail verticals, most recently as the CISO at Levi Strauss, where I tell people my job was not to secure the company, but my responsibility was to sell more jeans, which I think is going to be a key theme here around how does a CISO go shopping for vendors actually rationalize and justify what they do. So let's kick it off. What I'd like each of the panelists to do is to spend a minute or two, introduce yourself, talk about where you are, and also kind of like I just did, talk about the verticals you've been in so that our audience has a chance to see the different types of verticals that are being represented, not just in your current role, but in your prior role. So as we start to work through the questions that Val has posed, our audience will be able to hear it from the different perspectives, right? Because there is no one right way. And so I really want to be able to give you all a chance to be able to share your experiences of how you see these questions, not just going forward, but how they operate. So with that, I'm going to start with Ken Foster, a longtime ambassador. Ken, the floor is yours. Introductions.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Ken Foster. Today I am global head of architecture at a large automotive manufacturing supplier. I've been doing cybersecurity for closing in on 30 years myself. in IT support. I have worked in public and private sector throughout my career. I've worked in fintech, I've worked in services, I've worked in the technology startup side of the world. And like I said, today I'm in manufacturing, which is, so I've got a pretty good gamut of different verticals that I've been in and seen some interesting things throughout the years, and the way the relationships and the way we purchase has definitely shifted. And I think, in today's environment, it is changing ever again. And it's not like we have a shortage of people to pick from nowadays that are doing the same thing. So it's become a very interesting landscape and discussion when it comes into looking at our new vendor and a new supplier.
Excellent. Tim, floor is yours.
Thanks, Steve. Good morning, everybody. Tim Hampton. Like Ken, I've been in the IT and cyber world for going on 30 years. I started my journey in 95. I'm not going to try to do the public math, but we're all pretty close there. I've had the opportunity to support a number of different industries, spent some time in the military, and then I've supported everything from national defense to large enterprise deployments to critical infrastructure, some small work in power industries. And then most recently, I've spent the last 2.5 years at a company called Sierra Space, so we're a space technology and defense startup. And I've been the CISO again for about 2.5 years and recently transitioned over to the CIO role.
Travis.
Yeah, thanks all. Good morning. So I'm the Director of IT Business Operations for our Biosciences division at Thermo Fisher. That division is about a $4.3 billion division. Got about 33 manufacturing sites across the globe, manufacturing life science products, which is typically consumables, as well as instruments for scientists and researchers. I have the privilege of sitting on the operations leadership team, responsible for all things their applications, infrastructure, strategy, security, automation, now even ChatGPT. So I've been doing this now for about 6 years, been in IT for about 20, primarily in the healthcare and biotech vertical.
And Paulo.
Cool. Thanks, Steve. So I'm Paulo Damondo, head of application security at the Motley Fool. Motley Fool is in the financial services industry, but I've also been in the energy industry with O-Power. I was a security person at Tanium, building the actual software that gets deployed to millions of endpoints. And I had a chance to become a practitioner in 2020 with the Motley Fool, doing the actual security for a company. So I thought that was a great transition from my previous life as a software developer into a security practitioner. And I would say I'm a pretty hands-on director, right, of security. I try to get my hands into the actual day-to-day security of our application, and that involves reviewing security vendors.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. So let's start out with the question that every salesperson, right, just wants to know. This is the $1 million question, which was for this year, for the remainder of this year and going into next year, right? For each of you, what are the key factors influencing your purchasing decisions? So not what technologies do you want to buy, but let's take a step back and just start with, what's your budget looking like? What are the pressures that you're seeing that the company is putting on you, right, that are top of mind that you're having to take into account before you go vendor shopping? So I'm actually going to do it in the other order here. Paulo, I'm going to let you go first and put you on the hot seat.
Yeah, absolutely. So, two things come to mind, right? So compliance is really important for our organization. And I can think of when, PCI 4.0 came down and they had a new slew of requirements for client-side security. We always kind of knew that we had to implement it, right? But it really brought visibility and increased the importance of that particular tool. And so, that was a main reason for us shopping for client-side security solutions. And I imagine other companies have the same pressures as well, right? So when a new mandate like, SBOM comes down, I'm sure especially the federal agencies, more and more people are going to be interested in that space. Even those outside of the federal agency will probably see that and will be sort of influenced in looking into that. So it just increases the profile of that particular that particular space. So I imagine that's something that a lot of CISOs are seeing and reacting to.
Travis.
Yeah, I also agree. Like security compliance, we work in a heavy regulated environment, FDA, GMP, ISO, and so forth. So validation is very important for us. Also, I think there's been a big trend in 2024, as we all know, in Q4 of last year, there was the advent of AI, right? I think what's kind of keeping us up at night is how do we secure that? So I think that's kind of a big factor right now. There's always cost pressure that we have to be mindful of that. But I think about compliance, I think about AI, and then I think about kind of vendor reputation as well too.
Good point. Tim?
Yeah, Steve, I'll augment a couple of things. I don't disagree at all with anything that the panel has said. I would start with, does it solve, especially latter in the fiscal year, does it solve a business problem? There's a good chance that by this point in the year, I've probably allocated the bulk, if not all, of my security budget and my IT budget. And so if I'm going to go back and say I need to spend more, add more in at the end of the year, it's generally a business problem that I'm solving less than a security problem. Now, if I can solve both at the same time, that's perfect. But it's generally more focused on business enablement. Back to your point of your job was to sell jeans. The other thing that I'll look at is, can I actually use all of the functions in the tool or the product that I'm looking at? And the more that I examine this, and the more that I talk to peers, we have so many tools that we use half of, or a third of, or a tenth of, because we buy it for a feature. And so I'm really focused on, can we actually use all of the features in the tool set and they're not duplicative? And last, and I don't want to bash on Broadcom or VMware, but it highlights why I'm concerned about it. It's what are the exit terms and conditions, and what's the lock-in that we have from a price escalation and an exit perspective. And I am more focused on that now than I have been in my career.
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, so I'm probably a little bit different than everybody here. I'm probably in the least regulated environment right now, but I'm in an offset fiscal year. My year ends in 2 weeks. So everything that was planned for this year is already done. And now I've already put in a budget for next year and I've been planning, but as we look across, I think it's a great point as we look, and I also own both infrastructure and part of security in my role today, right? So VMware is a great example. There's not a software company out there that does not have a price increase this year. So pricing has become how do we lower the cost of operating efficiently to keep the business producing the parts and things that we produce in the most efficient, most resilient way. So now it's tools rationalization, application rationalization is a big topic of conversation, and looking at the tooling and going, do we have those tools that are underutilized, and do we understand our control objectives and what our actual risk profile is in a way that allows us to properly build a strategy out that says, these are the things that I really have to have, and these are the things that are nice to have, and these are the things that don't move the needle. If they're not helping me build a part more efficiently and keep production, globally, keep production up 24/7, 365 days a year, then what is the actual value in that? Because I don't have a regulatory hammer necessarily to say that or a compliance hammer that says I have to do this. I have best practices. I have some privacy laws and things across different parts of the globe that I have to be concerned with. But now it's really looking and understanding fully what our control objectives are, what the risk appetite of the board is, and how do I make sure that we're doing what we're doing, everything that we're doing is working as efficiently. And it's also a force multiplier, right? We all talk about people, we all talk about the lack of people, but and then we talk, I think that's going to continue to be a strategy, is how do we do more with less? AI is becoming a big piece of that, right? How do we leverage that to be more advantageous with less people, but be smart about the use cases that we're doing with this and securing that. So I think that's a big part of what I'm looking at. Those are the pressures I'm dealing with right now, is just how to lower the overall cost of IT and security while maintaining the right level of operational resiliency. So tools rationalization has become a huge part of it. And being in manufacturing, I have a lot of tech debt. So now it's going back, looking at the tech debt, trying to figure out where the right money is being spent strategically. So,
Okay.
Can I just add to what Ken said, and that is so true, Ken, especially with VMware, with the cost pricing structure change, that is putting a lot of pressure on making trade-offs and decisions. That's a huge thing, and you're absolutely right. That does impact a lot of companies.
Big. All right, I'm going to probe a little bit more on this, because I think for the audience, they have some perceptions about where money comes from, right? And how much shopping we do. And I'm going to let you all now just kind of answer individually. I'm not going to call you out because we got a flow going, right? Which was, so for each of you, to the best that you can, give the audience an idea of about how many security products you have deployed and how many products you go shopping for in the next year. Okay. So that they get a sense for the size of your organization and really, I want to say how few products are actually going to be brought in-house associated with the consolidation. So for each of you basically can you give the audience a size of the number of products you have in the ground, what your target is, and how many you go shopping for in an average year?
I can jump in pretty quick because I've been looking at it a lot here lately. So if I call pure security product, and I'm going to say a pure security play product, I've got a little over 90, right? Globally across the globe. But I've got other products that may not necessarily be considered a full-blown security product but are a big component or a piece of this that I'm looking at. And again, it comes down to what I'm shopping for now is do I have the right tool in place to meet? Do I have a gap, right? So normally what's going to lead me to go shopping is, do I have a gap in what my control objectives are, what my risk profile is that I need to fill, that none of the tooling I have fills, right? Now, the second half of that is if I have one of those tools, do I have something else in my and I'm gonna use Microsoft for example, and this is by no means a support of Microsoft or anything like that, but it's a conversation you have to have. If Microsoft with their new pricing models is saying that E5 is cheaper than E3, so now I'm getting some products from them that I'm going to be paying for anyway, I now have to do an actual rationalization against other tooling that overlaps with their product and go, is it good enough? I'm not looking for top right all the time. I'm looking for, is it good enough to meet my control objectives and to do what I need to do operationally while keeping my cost in check across the board? And that's ultimately the question we have to ask ourselves. Now, if I can't find that with the tool sets that I already own, or I have a gap that none of the tooling I have covers, then I need to go shopping for a new tool. So I'm very targeted in what I'm looking for. Now, I may be looking for, I may be having conversations around, let's look at automation tools. Let's look at things around AI. How do we improve and maybe move the needle on that? But some of those are probably not a fiscal year 2025 project. Those are probably fiscal year 2026 projects, because it's going to take a year of runway to understand all the problems that we've got, where we're going to dial in a new product. So I will start looking at new product probably a year plus before I'm even ready to implement it, because it's going to, in my size company, right? I'm in 112, 113 countries, 200 plus locations with 70,000 plus employees. It takes a while to roll this out. So I need to be thinking about how long that runway needs to be. And then we've got problems with and I'm gonna throw our friends VMware and Broadcom under the bus again, because I can't get a favorable exit clause and I'm locked in. What is that cost going to be in the overlap of the time it takes me to replace that technology? So I really need the vendors that I'm talking to, the resellers that I'm talking to, I need them to help me fully fully vet what the ROI and TCO is of ripping a product out and replacing it with their product. Even if it's a better product, a cheaper product, it doesn't necessarily mean in the total cost of ownership, it's going to be cheaper. And I really need the vendor's help to figure that problem out and put the math together and the strategy of selling it to my leadership on why this makes business sense to invest now, because it's normally going to be a larger upfront investment. And where is that crossover to when it starts costing me less money in the long run? Because I need to know what that total cost is over a 3 to 5 year period, right? So that's where I think we struggle a little bit, is we don't always get that from the vendors, from the manufacturers, is helping us build that platform out initially and making sure we've scoped it correctly.
Others?
Yeah, I would say, Steve, luckily I have a much simpler environment and smaller environment than Ken. I always like chatting with him because there's at least a portion of my day that feels better. So thanks, Ken. That said, we probably have somewhere between 15 and 20 security centric tools that are deployed across the environment. And I will say I am probably not looking for more than 1 or 2 a year that I'm going to fund that are true net new or net replacements. That said, and this is the part that I think sometimes there's some friction with from a vendor relationship perspective, I will take generally 1 call a month to explore new technologies, not necessarily because I have budget today, but just to learn what's the evolution of the ecosystem. And sometimes you find a problem that you didn't realize that you have. And to Ken's point, I'm probably never going to put that in my that year budget. That's oh, I didn't realize I had that problem. That's interesting, but it wasn't on my roadmap. It's not something I've talked to the board about. It's not something I've talked to the executive suite about. And so that's okay, that's an interesting thing to solve in 25, 26, 27. But I'm always interested in the evolution of the capability of what could be. And so I think there's some conversations we need to have there as an ecosystem of not every call is a sales call.
And I'm gonna echo that a little bit, because I do spend I do dedicate quite a bit of time to talking to startups and the new people coming out, and some of that is simply discovery on my part, and go, how we have a problem that we've been dealing with for X amount of time, whatever that problem is. And then, we can throw out any vertical inside, any core tenet of cybersecurity, whether that's identity, whether that's encryption, whether that's network segment, network security, whatever it is, right? The new startups that are coming out are thinking about new and improved ways of trying to deal with these problems that we've been struggling with for a long period of time. So sometimes it's sitting down and trying to figure out how people are looking at this problem. And again, it's long-term planning. It's okay, this is going to be interesting now. I will say there is one other thing that makes you go shopping, and that normally starts with a B or an I, that word that comes out of it. Now that is more of an emergency shopping thing, and that's a different conversation than I am just strategically planning, right? And then I do think we need to break it into those 2 categories. That there could be something happen, I'm bleeding, I need to fix it now, I need it bandaged. What is the tool that's going to help me do that if I don't already own that tool? Now, maybe turning on another module or turning on a capability that I've not been currently paying for with a license set or in my environment, or maybe a totally new tool. So I will say that is the other side of it, is there's always that emergency thing that comes out that it's fixing a problem that's happening actively.
Yep.
I echo the startups being so forward thinking in the new features that they have. Like that's pretty much why I want to keep my ear to the ground and talk to vendors. For context, I have like 15 to 20 security centric tools as well. I would say maybe 5 is 5 a year is what we're looking to either add net new or maybe displace, because we weren't happy with certain aspects of their performance in our environment. So it's it's a lot of talking with vendors, and trying to understand what will it bring to tools that I already use.
I was gonna say we've got I was going to, sorry, Travis.
Go ahead, Ken.
Or Tim, I was going to answer the question for Blake, but I see you already answered it. I was going to say, yeah, I was going to throw in that what it really means best to breed in the requirement really depends on how well you know your environment. I'm never buying purely off of the top right quadrant. Does it fit my environment? Does it fit well with the other tools? Does it cover, does it, you know, because you can look at, let's just take whatever endpoint solution you're using, right? And you look at what do I'm trying to accomplish out of this? Is it a basic compliance? I need endpoint protection. Well, any of them check that box. Do I need one of the features that one of the better products or has other feature set? Does that really move my needle in my control set? If it does, then there's an argument to go with the higher rated product, right? But if there's not a real compelling reason, if I'm using a basic function and the only reason I need it is because I need an endpoint protection, because somebody somewhere in a framework or a regulator or a compliance says I must have some kind of endpoint protection on my endpoint, then they all cover that checkbox. So if I'm not gaining any capability from it or any operational efficiency, and now the other requirement I have is, does my team understand the tool? Do I have a skill set that says they're going to be able to do this? And that's all goes into the requirement of what I'm trying to accomplish with a tool, not just looking at best of breed and going, oh, I've said this many times. I know Steve's heard and Valve heard me say this. You can have the greatest tool that's ever hit the market. If I don't have an actual requirement or need, and it's not going to reduce a risk for me or close a gap for me, I'm never going to buy it because I don't need it. Right. Because we have to get away from being the people. And I've seen this in too many companies. We have to not be the person who's buying shiny tools, right? And I've talked to too many CEOs, too many senior leaders who say those security guys, they like their shiny toys and they like to go out and buy all the new things that come out. So we've got to be fiduciary responsibility as well to say we're only buying things that actually address risk and gaps in our environment that meet the overall strategy of our business.
Yep. So Travis, you've been quiet. I'm calling you out. You're hoping I forgot the question, okay? But it didn't happen. So
how big is the portfolio?
Just very quickly before Travis answers the questions, I noticed Ro raised his hand. So please don't raise hands. If you have any questions, ask them via the chat, because this is the most efficient way. We just don't want to interrupt, obviously, the flow of the discussion. So thank you for that. Go ahead, Travis. Sorry.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we've got tens and thousands of apps, but security centric, probably in the range of 100 or less or so. I think the big thing for us is we are really looking at consolidation, right? Because there's so many apps out there. So I think there's a big trend towards consolidation and cost efficiency. So we see a lot of like consolidation, like Microsoft, and moving towards, Microsoft Intune, going to secure devices with that. And then we also see this trend of single pane of glass. So, I kind of feel that we have too many apps and we're going different places, and that causes a lot of inefficiency. So I think there's this kind of this trend for looking at what app can really do, give us that single pane of glass from a security perspective. So I think that's a big trend that's going on right now.
All right. So we're 30 minutes in almost, right? And for the audience, I want you to see just how broad-based the responses are by the practitioners, okay, about where the money comes from, what's driving them, where the industry is pushing them, okay? So I hate to say this, but we are all snowflakes, but we do have some common expectations, right, of what's driving us, and you're kind of hearing the budget side of the house. So now let's transition to, okay, we're actually going to go shopping. Right? So I'd like each of you to talk about what sources of information, right, do you use in order to be able to, in this day and age, come to the conclusion of which one or two vendors are you going to put into POC? So what does that decision process look like for you nowadays? Tim?
Yeah, I'll try to be real brief in the interest of time, Steve, since you're calling us out, and we'll try to get to more of the questions. So succinctly, I would say I'm going to start with my peer group. So I'm going to reach out to folks like you, to Travis, to Ken, others, and say, have you solved this problem? Were you happy with it? Second is, who have I worked with in the past, or who have I met with in the past? Back to my comment earlier about I'm meeting so that I'm learning about problems I'm going to solve in the future. After that, I'm going to go to a more formal source. For us, we use a company called Infotech, right? We all have, it's Gartner or something like that. Hey, can you do base benchmarking or base evaluations for us? And then the other source that I'm probably going to go to is just my team, right? I mean, I have a wealth of experience underneath me, and I'm gonna grab my team and say, okay, team, have you solved this before? And then the other parallel to folks like Infotech who do sort of that benchmarking for you. Most of us have an integrator that we've worked with, and most of our integrators will do some sort of sourcing and benchmarking to do the legwork for us.
That was a mouthful.
Travis?
That was an excellent summary. Go ahead, Travis.
Sure. So, I mean, the first thing you think about is like a trusted source, like a Gartner or Forrester, when definitely we're evaluating different vendors and so forth. Also agree, peer groups and great vendor partners like ExecWeb here are very, very helpful. Also, I think too, we have like a lot of internal colleagues that have experience, so they're going to bring recommendations. We get tons of emails from vendors as well too. There's some influence there. More recently, I think, especially after COVID too, is, the conferences, those are kind of coming back online. And so that's been very helpful to get in front of different vendors as well too. And of course, there's the online forums in different communities as well.
Which one is your favorite?
Probably I see a lot of recommendations from internal colleagues. I mean, we have over 4,000, 5,000 colleagues of internal staff, and they bring expertise from different companies or they have expertise internally. And generally they're coming forward and they're raising their hand like, hey, I've worked with this company before, or I've seen good things about them. So that holds a lot of weight.
Okay. Paulo?
Yeah, I echo all those sources. One thing I do want to point out that I think influences me directly is how the vendor works with all the secondary influencers in the company. So, we work with systems engineering, client solutions, right? And in many cases, the solution that we're putting in can and will affect their day-to-day workflow, right? So think of developers, right? If we put a tool in their CI/CD pipeline, that could possibly make their lives hell, right? Because it might lengthen the time that they get to merge their commits. And so I want to be very I want to be very pointed and see if the vendor can address the secondary influencers decision, because we don't want to field a crisis if the security solution isn't performing. So that's very important to me.
Ken?
I was gonna say, I everybody here is we've all hit the same thing, right? I think I put the most weight in my peer network, right? Because I know a lot of people there's probably not a product out there I can't reach out to somebody I know on the phone or an email or LinkedIn and ask them, hey, and we have some private groups. ExecWeb helps out with that as we meet with people and like this group here. But we're also, I think asking that question, because you're going to get the real story. You're going to get yeah, we looked at these products. These are the things they could do for us. They couldn't do for us. Or, you know what, we bought this product. These are the things that went very well. These are the things we forgot to ask about. So a lot of times that conversation helps me build out my requirement document a little better. That I'm going to go out, because now I'm going to ask some of these vendors a little more deeper questions on this. I do use my trusted partner supplier network a lot to say, hey, we're looking at these 3 products to solve this problem. What have you seen in your install base that you've been working with, and things like that? Get some input from there. And then normally I always am going to do a little bit of research. I'm going to read the Gartner, Forrester, the Infotech. I'm going to read those papers that are out there. I'm going to do a little research on my own. But again, I'm going to sit down with my team. I'm going to say, here is our problem. You guys live this day in, day out. What is the things that are going to make this easier for you? What have you seen in your history or your past? And we're going to collaborate on this and put together the requirements. And then ultimately, we're going to send that list of requirements out to probably 5 tops people who say they solved this problem. And we're going to ask them questions. You know, we're going to have a technical call with them. We're going to have multiple technical calls with them. We're going to beat them up over it. And ultimately, that's going to narrow it down to probably that final couple that are going to be in an RFP that are going to get into probably more pricing negotiations than it is capability negotiations at that point. So.
Yep. All right.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask the question a slightly different way now, because again, it's what vendors and what we talk about, which was, what does your POC process look like now versus what it was like? Okay. Because when we came up, right, an example would be, hey, 5 years ago, we're going to do a POC, we're going to do research, we're going to bring in 5 vendors, we're going to look at them for 3 months, we're going to bring it down to the final 2 or 3, we're going to do a deeper POC, then we're going to get to finals of 1 or 2, go into negotiation, and then pick product, okay? For each of you, describe what the POC process looks like for you now. How many you bring in, and about how long you see the sales cycle taking. Tim, I'm going to let you go first again.
Perfect. So for us, I will tell you, we've really ramped down proofs of concepts or POCs, generally speaking, because my team is fatigued by them. And it gets back to what Ken was saying. And so for our current process, I've actually pinky swore with my team, and I told them I agree never to say yes to a POC. And so I will listen to a vendor's offer for a POC, but my team gets the final say on yes, we will or won't run a POC. And so I think, you know, our cycle is, 1, do we have a current implementation that's going on that it's going to conflict with? 2, does my team have time to run the POC? And 3, do I have budget on the backside? And so that's what my cycle looks like for saying yes to a POC. Because there's a lot of vendors that want to, you know, just run the POC. Even if you don't have the budget, it'll be time well spent. Well, it actually won't. And so we don't say yes to that. And so from a timeline perspective, again, you're looking at 12 to 18 months is reality, right? Because unless it's a problem that I was shopping for, or Ken's point earlier about, hey, it's you know, there was a news event that now you're shopping for. You know, budgets don't grow throughout the year.
Travis?
Yeah, I kind of agree with that last comment. I definitely see like POCs ramping down just due to time and effort. And I agree, the sales process, I would say it's somewhere around 6 to maybe 12 months, still pretty slow. But yeah, I definitely see that if it makes sense for the particular use case, and maybe it's an unknown vendor or not really seasoned, or there's not a lot known about the vendor, then we may go forward with the POC. But there is a lot of time and effort put into that, and we're very conscious of how much time we're investing in those POCs.
Follow.
Yeah. So, you know, I am cognizant, like everyone else, that POCs take time. For us, you know, we're a little bit more nimble, given that we don't have a huge team. And so, you know, obviously it's important that we have time to field these POCs. It still would probably take anywhere from 3 to 5 months to complete one. So I only select or only start a POC if there's an actual need, right? Are we solving a business problem, or are we, you know, well, one thing I don't want to do is just select something because it's the shiny tool. And so, you know, I'm very strict about, you know, identifying a business problem and starting one based on that.
Go ahead, Ken, bring us home.
Same thing, ramping down. I mean, I don't do a POC now until we've actually been through the RFP process. So we've more or less down selected to who we think it's going to be. That's our POC. And basically that POC is to prove that it does everything they said it would do inside my environment. Because that's the last opportunity for us to not sign paper and move forward. So we've already been through all that formal RFP process, getting the bids, and then we go to POC. Because again, it's a 9 to 15 month process. I have to do almost as much work to do a POC as I do to go live in production anyway. So it's a lot of it, and my team's stretched as thin as they can be stretched now. I don't want them wasting a bunch of time on something that's a fool's gambit, right? I want them to be focused on make sure this does what they said it does. Then we sign the contract and move forward with it.
Perfect. For everybody that's listening, if you look into the webinar chat, there's some great comments and feedback by them. So just go ahead and look at this, because I'm trying to push as much detail out to the audience as we can. So I'm not going to repeat, but just look over there. All right. Next question that we always want to do when we go shopping is, what's the number one thing a vendor can do that will guarantee that you will show them the door? Okay. And I'll give you like my example, which was my pet peeve is when a vendor comes in and tells me, "Hi, Steve, I'm here to help you." Okay. It's almost, a visceral reaction, which is great. So all you really want to do is make this a transaction to take my money and then leave me on the street when the bullets start flying. Okay. So for each of you, right, because the vendors always want to say, how do I talk with you? How do I engage? Some of the questions on the chat are coming through. So for each of you, what is that visceral thing that if a vendor comes in or how they approach you that, you basically go, thanks, but no thanks? Tim, I'm going to start with you again.
I love this question. Can I sneak in too?
Yes.
So the first one is, you bought my personal cell phone number from a call list, and you call my personal cell number and say, "You asked for this meeting." No, I didn't. I've never given out my personal cell number, and so I know exactly what you did. And so that's number one, and I've had it happen frequently. Or I'll even answer the phone and say, "I'm sorry, this is my personal cell phone. Inappropriate." And then it's, "Okay, but could we take 5 minutes?" So that's my number one. The number two, and I won't mention the vendor that did this. They're actually a fairly large vendor, and I was surprised. They were trying to sell me something, and they started the presentation, and they spent the first 15 minutes of the presentation educating me and teaching me that there was a ransomware problem. Oh, really? Like that's interesting. I didn't know that. Like, I mean, it was like, this is what ransomware is and statistics on the problem. And it was an hour-long call. We get to the end of the 15 minutes. I kept trying to interrupt them, and I've said, "Okay, guys, I'm just going to end this meeting." I just ended the meeting and walked away.
Sorry, I don't mean to laughing, but we're all laughing going, this is truth.
I was like,
this is brutal truth, and Val hears it all the time.
yes.
So I really appreciate that. All right, Travis, how about you?
Yeah, I kind of agree with that as well too, as I get these calls all the time on my cell. I think it's when the vendor tries to overcommit or oversell what they could really do. And you hear a lot about, hey, we're going to give you X amount of productivity with our solution, and there's not really an explanation behind it, or we're really going to reduce this risk by this much, and it just seems like very inflated. I think that's a big turn off in terms of opening up the door.
Oh,
Speaking of vendors calling you, I have actually a funny story. I was interested in this vendor's pitch, and I went to their website, and within 5 minutes, I got a call from that vendor. So the creepiness factor is just off the charts sometimes. But answering the question, so it's really important that the vendor understands our business requirements, right? We're not looking at it from a feature standpoint, right? We don't care about all the bells and whistles that your tool provides. Once we've had a few conversations and you understand what I'm trying to achieve, where I'm trying to come from, you need to speak in that language, right? Because it's not so that's what's really going to seal the deal. And that's a big turnoff for me when they keep on harping on the things that they think are cool.
Ken?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything here. I will tell you one other one that will really get you banned from me is not only did you call my cell phone, but you called my wife's cell phone.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's a new one.
Yeah. Look, if you're emailing me, and I haven't answered you, I probably don't have a need to talk to you. If I need you, I'll reach out to you. Just because I accepted your LinkedIn request doesn't mean I'm instantly interested in buying your product, right? I think the other thing is, and this is a pet peeve of mine around BDRs. If I'm already a customer, quit having your BDRs and SDRs call me to generate new business. And I'm
Oh,
already a
yeah.
customer. Link up your damn sales prospecting list with your current customer list. Because normally that facilitates me calling my account rep and going, why are your people calling me and bothering me when we've been a customer of yours for 5 years? Right.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's a pet peeve. And I'm very much on the don't come in and tell me you know what my problem is or educating me on what the problem is in the ransomware thing is phenomenal. I think that's great. The ambulance chasing crap also bugs me, right? We all knew that CrowdStrike had the problem. We didn't need you to tell us that you could now. So, or Anthem got their breach and all of a sudden you're trying to sell us on a product. We know it's happening. We understand it. What we're trying to figure out is, do we have that same risk? Now, what you can sit down with me and have a conversation and go, is this something you're concerned about? And do you have questions that maybe we can help you answer from things that we've seen or been privy to that maybe you've not been privy to? That's a conversation I'm probably willing to have. I'm not willing to be hard sold because somebody else got breached. We all are aware of it. We all probably got phone calls. We're probably talking to the people we know that work at these companies, seeing how we can help support them or get anything that we can help them understand, right? So we don't need you to be coming right behind us trying to sell us your product because I own the same product that just had that
Yep.
issue. So
Yep. Cool. All right. We're coming to the end, believe it or not. I really want to thank all of you as panelists. You made this painless for me. I basically didn't have to do anything. You did a great job. For all the audience, this is brutal truth. I did everything I could, and so did the panelists, to talk to you about what it's like to be a CISO. And that's, in essence, what we're simply saying is you really have to understand what it's like to be us now, because you're not selling us sneakers, right? We're in a war. And we are trying to figure out who has our back, not who's whispering in our ear. Okay. Kind of my sage advice, and Val and all of you have done that. So let me bring it to a close for final comments for everybody. And to the audience, we said, when Val started, we said there were 5 things we were going to talk about, right? Key factors influencing CISO purchasing decisions in 2024, which we covered. How CISOs research and evaluate new vendors and technologies. We talked about the POC process. Specific resources and channels that we use to find vendors. You heard us talk about how we really leverage a variety of ways, but more and more we just trust our own network, our own people. Strategies for building trust with the CISO suite. You heard what pisses us off. Sorry, I'll just put it right out there. And then the role of budget ROI and proof of concept. When we went through what POCs look like, where the budgets are, the cycles. Okay? So I think we did a great job covering the audience. And for the audience, these were words of wisdom. So I'd like to give each of our panelists a final 15 seconds for any final thoughts you have on this topic of how does a CISO security director go vendor shopping? And so I'll just maintain the flow here. Tim, I'll give you first floor.
Perfect. So a couple of things that come to mind very briefly. Ken mentioned it, but I'll foot stomp it. Communities like this and platforms like this, like ExecWeb, are a great way for us to learn of each other and learn what the capabilities are that are out there. The other part that we didn't talk about, I also meet quarterly with venture capitalist groups to say, hey, here's my problems and what do you see coming? The last thing that I will leave this group with, back to the building trust piece, and it also gets to the ROI, is if I come to you and say, I was hoping your platform did this thing, and I can show you why this is an industry problem. You really want to build trust and start a relationship. Be honest with me, say, it doesn't do that, but let me go back to the team and consider putting that on our roadmap, and then tell me where it is in a roadmap. And so if you're interested in hearing new problems and how to evolve your platforms, and then how to continue to solve more of my problems, great way to build trust.
Travis?
Yeah, first, just want to thank Val and ExecWeb. This is a great platform, a great opportunity to kind of share knowledge within the community. Just going back to that comment too, I think trust is a huge important factor here. And I'm still a big fan of having in-person meetings. I know we do a lot with virtual now after COVID, and it's easy, but still having those face-to-face interactions, those are very meaningful. I think about a lot of vendors that are coming to our sites, talking to us about their products, talking to us about their roadmaps, how they can help us. So getting out, getting in person, meeting the people face to face, I think is still very important in this day and age. The second thing I would say is just being very transparent about what your solution can and cannot do. So I tend to lean towards vendors that are very open and transparent. Like if they can't do something, they'll say it, and they're very honest versus overinflating what they can do and the value that they can bring. The last thing is just having a proven track record and really strong use cases, and kind of providing those studies and references is also very important.
Follow.
Yeah, again, thank you, Val, for putting this together. This was really a fun event for me. My answer here is help me when I'm bringing a solution in, I'm putting my name on the line, and I want to be assured that I'm not going to look bad in front of my developers, that I'm not going to look bad in front of the C-suite, right? When I'm bringing a tool, please help me assure these groups that that the tool can be introduced in a very responsible way, right? So maybe we start off with monitoring and not necessarily like blocking their workflows, and then help me ramp up so that I can gain more visibility and the effectiveness of the tool. But it would be good to have a good on ramp to that instead of like bringing the tool completely to a place where it might cause some havoc. So that's my take.
Great. Ken, bring us home.
Yeah, I think I'm going to build off of the comment that Paulo just made. Is look, you've got to, if I'm replacing a product with your product, you've got to help me understand how I'm going to blow my political capital to put, because the work I'm going to put on my external teams, whether I'm changing their process and not, and help me make sure that we're selling that and not causing harm to those other teams, right? Because rarely is the security team alone the person who's implementing this. It's going to be infrastructure folks, it's going to be application folks. So we're putting work on them, and they need to understand why and help us build out that and help us make that as efficient as possible. Because it may mean production outages. Well, it probably is going to mean production outages. It's going to mean we've got to move stuff around. So we need to make sure we're explaining all the steps and understand fully the work it's going to take to implement your product. For the products, the newer products coming out, especially if you're in a space that there's a lot of competitors, if you can't tell me in the first 5 minutes we're having a conversation on how you're different and why you jumped into this space, you're doing a disservice, right? You've got to make sure you tell us upfront why you're the special snowflake that you are, right? Because if you're in one of these spaces that especially today, there's a new one coming out every day that's in the exact same space doing the exact same thing, at least from the outside. Help us understand why you're different and what your approach is that's going to make you valuable to me, right? But again, it's about the relationship, it's about the partnership, it's about making sure that we have sat down and you understand my problem, I understand your capabilities, you have never lied to me, you've never oversold your product. We are transparent, because the worst thing that I can do is buy a product that I think is doing something, and 3 months down the road find out it doesn't fully do that because somebody forgot to ask the right question, or didn't think of the question to ask. So that's the partnership part of that I expect out of you guys is help us think. If we didn't ask it, ask us if you know it's an important feature or important problem, right? That's the partnership. That's how trust is built. That's going to help me recommend you to my peers when they call me and go, hey, I'm looking at this technology. What did you think of it when you implemented it or when you looked at it? Just be transparent. Now, I am going to flip one thing on the end. We're asking all you vendors and manufacturers to be transparent with us. I know the panel here has heard me say this before. We owe it from our seat to be transparent and honest with you. If we're not giving you correct feedback and not telling you where the actual problems are with your product or why we're not interested in a product, that's a disservice. And I think that's one thing with this group, with Val, with ExecWeb, that's one thing we all strive to do is when we do have these one-on-one meetings with you, we're giving you honest, transparent feedback. We're telling you the tough, your baby's ugly sometimes, or it doesn't fix all my problems. I challenge anybody who's sitting on our side, on the customer side, to be transparent and honest, just as you're asking the people trying to sell you a product. Because if you're not, it's a one-way relationship and there's no value in it. So
Perfect. All right, Val, you want to bring us home? We're right at the top of the hour. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Ken, Tim, Paolo, Travis, and Steve, of course. This was incredible. Thank you so much, guys, for your 60 minutes. Actually went over 15 minutes, and I hope everybody appreciates that. And the brutal truths that you related, I think, are extremely impactful and insightful, and hopefully that will make the collaboration between you and cybersecurity vendors much more efficient and better, and is going to make the entire cybersecurity industry more efficient. And that's our goal ultimately. But everybody found these extremely insightful insights very valuable. And those were the brutal truths that sometimes was not what you wanted to hear, but is what everybody had to hear. So with that, thank you very much, everyone. And we're going to see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
thank you.
Thanks.